What the fuck?
Fuck them all.
Fucking.
Lick my big black balls.
You slippery little bitch.
Bitch. Asshole.
Fuck me.
Shithole.
Fuck off, you lot.
Fuck yes, they did. Well, shit. Peace out, bitch. 'Cause I'm a beast.
Hey everybody, Malik's back for the time being, so the two of us are going to take the opportunity to talk about probably one of the hottest shows around right now, that being The Boys on Amazon Prime. And a quick disclaimer, I usually try to keep the content on this show as family friendly as possible, or on this channel rather, but it's going to be real difficult to talk about this show without just kind of giving into sort of the R-rated aspect of it, so we're not gonna do that much self-censoring over the course of this discussion. So if that bothers you, this probably isn't the video for you. But that said, let's get into it. I don't know. Do you want to start just because we didn't talk about? Did we do a video for season one?
We did, but the audio came out really bad, and so my discussion with you didn't end up getting posted. So we scrapped that, and you opted to do something that was a lot more like you did your own review, like off the cuff.
Okay,
And it was slightly edited, and I edited that for you. But yeah, we've done a video on it. My thoughts on the first season aren't known to the people on your channel.
Okay,
But,
so yeah, you might as well go into that.
Okay, well, I love the first season. I have watched it in its entirety 8 times now. And it's one of those shows that I probably rewatch regardless, but other friends that I know have seen it either asked me about it or I felt compelled to get them into it. So I watched it with a different set of friends almost every time. It's so fun seeing other people do it and I already know all the beats and the setups and the payoffs and like all that stuff is still great and it's fun going back to it again and again. But yeah, I really liked the first season and I was gone for like a month and a half right before the second season started airing, and that was there was a group of friends on my ship that hadn't seen it, so I watched it with them, and they really enjoyed it, and they're really excited about watching season 2. So I also took the time because I knew I'd be hungering for something while I was gone, so I went ahead and decided to read the entirety of the comics. I didn't finish. I think I'm on issue 60, maybe 70. Um, but yeah, I've read the majority of the comics now, and I'm not gonna say necessarily an appreciation, but I have a mild respect for the comics, like generally, kind of, because while a lot of it does read as a lot more mean spirited and just ugly and kind of disgusting with all the stuff that happens in that series, there's some genuine heart in there. I will give it that. There's some genuine heart in there sprinkled through. Um, Not nearly as well written as anything in this show, but it's a lot of it is okay. A lot of it is also kind of bad, and the artwork is really grimy and kind of nasty, and really takes a long time to get adjusted to. Towards the later half, the artwork isn't as nearly as ugly to look at, but yeah. So I have experience with the comics, which I did want to bring to this after rewatching the first season as many times as I did, and just wondering how faithful they were being versus how much they were coming up with. So that was really interesting. As far as this season goes, by the time I got back, I only had to wait for the finale. So I more or less got to have the binge experience that most people are complaining they didn't get to have when the season first dropped. And I just want to say, like, it's Amazon's show. Like, they're entitled to release it however they want. Like, would I have preferred to binge like most people? Uh, yeah, sure, but I'm not gonna whine and complain about it. Like, I still get to watch the show, and I still get to binge it once it's all out, which it now is. So I can have the binge experience now, um, if I am so inclined. But yeah, I don't think this season overall is quite as strong as season one, mainly because we have a few lingering plot lines here and there, and there's some stuff I'm conflicted about, which we'll talk through. But I think it was definitely a worthy successor to season one, and I'm very much excited to see where we go moving forward.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat in a lot of ways. I haven't read the comic, and like the sort of evaluation that you give it is what I'd heard from a lot of people, and that kind of turned me off on it. But yeah, the general consensus is that it pales in comparison to the show, and that the show made a lot of really smart choices in adaptation. And I really enjoyed season one, and I think I made that clear in the video I did on it. But this one I liked. I'm really torn on it because there are bits of it that I like even more than season one. But likewise, there's, unfortunately, some criticisms that we can definitely go into. And, the criticisms, the things that I do feel like weren't handled so well, unfortunately, are throughout the season. But yeah, we'll get into that. For the most part, I still think this is really, really strong TV, and it's got me more than excited to see where it goes in season three. I just hope that there are a couple of things just in the general presentation that they're able to clean up for next time. So I don't know. Do you want to start with the criticisms or just sort of where do you want to like dive in first?
I guess we can lay out basic like first few episodes like introduction like so we start the season and um Butcher obviously well I guess hold on, let me scale it back to the end of season one.
Hmm.
So season one of course ends on that epic mind-blowing cliffhanger where we find out that Becca is alive and she's been raising Homelander's son, and Homelander has decided to save Butcher and spare him to just to show him this and rub it in his face. And presumably, Homelander, like we know Butcher's alive, obviously, but it's like we gotta know like there's some reason that Homelander either lets him live or Butcher is somehow able to escape. Um, and I was curious as to what exactly that would be. Like, how do you, as a normal person, get away from Superman? Um, and the answer is you don't. He just lets you live. Um, and I was expecting short that they did to answer for that based on how or cryptic the showrunner talking. And yeah, it really wasn't, and it was kind of disappointing. And honestly, it's just a weird glorified deleted scene that didn't need to be there. Um,
Yeah, if
like
for
at
any
all. Like
reason
they act.
there's someone still listening to this who like we're gonna get into spoilers, but if you were just listening for a recommendation and you'd heard about the short, don't bother with it. It's really pretty superfluous.
Yeah. Um, so I really like how we start off the season um with Vought having to basically vilify all the and of course naturally as you would vilify all the terrorists that Homelander and A-Train gave Compound V to last season, and they've gotten their people into the military. Um, it's kind of strange to me, like that side of that initial first scene with Black Noir. Um, we don't like the military thing is kind of inconsequential. Like it doesn't really matter that the seven are now part of the military. Like we do almost nothing with that this season. Um, but
Yeah,
I like that.
Sorry to cut you off, but it's just there's a couple of things in terms of like the social commentary that feel really off to the side, and like the commentary itself is pretty flimsy and not a lot is done with it.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair complaint, and why I feel like this season overall. I mean, it's not bad by any means, but it's not as strong as season one.
Yeah, I'd say, and like I know you had another point that you were transitioning to, but I'd say the big issue with the season is just that it lacks focus. And so it's not like they're doing a bad job at the social commentary. It's just they've decided the big thing that they're going to focus on, and rightly so, I think, was Stormfront and all the stuff that comes prepackaged with her. And everything else doesn't really have a lot of time. So any other avenues that they might have taken to like criticizing the corporatization or the militarization kind of just get like a token couple of scenes to them. And it feels that way with characters a lot too, where more so than season one, season two, I'd say, feels like the weight of having as many characters as it does.
Yeah, we do have a lot of characters here. That's
Mhm.
something Eric Kripke, the showrunner, talks about a lot at length. Is that yeah, it's like we got a lot of characters to service, and they do because you're not just dealing with um like the super villain superheroes that are the seven, and you're also have the boys to deal with, and you got to give them arcs, and they, I would say all around, they definitely do a better job of giving the boys arcs than they do the seven this season. Um, but with the very strong exception of Starlight, I love Starlight and what we do with her this season. She has to get her hands dirty. Um, she compromises her morals for her goals, and like she's still like at the core a genuinely good person, but she's living more in shades of gray now. She has to do devious things and underhanded things to try to help the boys take down Vought and take down the Seven. And she's
Yeah.
way more likable and proactive here than she ever was in the comic.
Mm. She's great, and Homelander and Stormfront for what they get are great. And everyone else is kind of off to the side, but like we can tackle them sort of one by one. But yeah,
Uh,
Starlight's great this season.
yeah, I would like to talk about Homelander's introduction scene. Um,
Mm,
yeah, it's one of my favorite scenes in the earlier episodes. It's where like see that even though he has eliminated his mother figure, that was a bit premature on his part because mentally he's not really prepared for that, and like he's drinking her breast milk, and um we get the scene of Ashley coming back in, and she has a new member of the Seven ready for him called Blind Spot, essentially an Asian daredevil, and he's like at first he's really appears to be really excited and open-minded about it, and of course we know that like he's a cripple. Like, would you think I would ever let a cripple in the Seven? And just that whole scene of him in Ashley's face and screaming at her, and like saying, I control everything. I control my own marketing. Who goes in the Seven? All that. That was a really strong, powerful scene.
yeah. And it immediately sets the tone for a lot of scenes, which is just I feel bad for Ashley and she needs to quit this job.
Yeah, we get to a point where her hair starts to fall out, and we're like, oh no, like she does not deserve this.
Take a paid vacation. Just quit. What are you doing, lady?
Yeah, I'd like you to speak further to the earlier stuff. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I think it was definitely a good idea for them to drop the first three episodes as a package. And like we've had this discussion before about sort of our approach to binging and stuff. I'm not someone who ever really feels like I need to binge a thing. Sometimes I'll end up doing it if the option is available. But like, just to briefly speak on this, the response by fans of like review bombing the show for no
Yeah,
other
that's
reason
just
then they're
That's
mad the episodes got released weekly. That's dumb.
yeah.
And like, yeah, I really condemn that. But I feel like the reason it was good to drop those three together, maybe it's because they dropped them together, but it feels like those three episodes are all sort of one big ramp up to the reveal of what the deal is with Stormfront, because there is certainly stuff going on with everyone else. Like Annie and Huey are sort of picking off from where their relationship left off at the end of season one, which is this kind of iffy place. But the real central focus is Homelander and like his control issues and his need to be loved, which is like his whole thing throughout the season. And then the way that Stormfront comes in and just completely shakes that up. And from the beginning, like from the first bits of her that we saw in marketing, all the way up through that big reveal in episode three, where it turns out she's even more psychopathic than Homelander is, and is like way worse than him in a lot of ways, but yet has the thing about her is that she has better perfected like the actual charisma and interacting with people thing, where Homelander, very purposefully from a writing perspective, feels like a sort of Superman parody in the sense that Superman shows up and he has his inspirational words and he seems like a good guy and a nice guy, but there's not really, he doesn't have that like magnetic quality necessarily. Whereas Stormfront comes in and she has that, and she can be a little bit obnoxious, but she gets a lot of people in story and the audience, I think, on her side throughout the first two episodes and the first half of episode three. And I found it really interesting her interactions with Starlight in that first bit, where I felt good for Starlight because it seemed like there was finally someone in the seven who, on some level, she could relate to and appreciate and wasn't just a puppet of the corporation or just too disillusioned to do anything. And they did a really good job of making Stormfront really interesting and really likable across the first couple episodes, so that when she just shows up and turns out to be a horrible racist and just does not care about collateral damage, it's like you could hear a pin drop in a room when after that happened if you're watching it with people. And it's like, oh geez, that was really, really smartly played. So yeah, like I feel if they just dropped episode one and we'd had to wait a while to get to where we end off with episode three, like if we'd had to wait a couple of weeks to get there, I could see myself being a little annoyed with that. Because episodes one and two are good, but they feel like build to the end of episode three. And
Oh,
that doesn't even just apply to Stormfront. That also applies to Huey and Butcher's conflict, because you mentioned when we were discussing it over email of like it's good that we get to have that conflict between them resolved, where Huey spends the first couple episodes and especially episode three like just so done with all of this and the trauma is really getting to him and he's like almost catatonic, he's hardly there, and it's perfectly relatable, but if you had to put up with that for too long, then it would have maybe gotten a bit annoying.
yeah. And because I was worried about it. I was like, yeah, I'm not really liking Huey, and like we definitely push him to a place and like resolve that in a way where it's like it doesn't necessarily feel too fast. Like that was just what we needed when we get to episode three and Butcher comes out and obviously with the help of Kamiko's brother, saves Huey from Starlight and Homelander and puts his hand out, and like that's enough. Like they've resolved their stuff. They're back on the same page.
Yeah, and like the bit we have with Mother's Milk in the cave or like in the sewers, where he's like, Huey's your canary. like he's your gauge of when you've gone too far. You need him more than you need any of us. That's a really true point, and I think it was a moment that Butcher needed of like even in season one, even though the relationship is still very rocky, Huey is the person who he empathizes with the most and is able to treat most with something resembling like care and tenderness, and seeing how far he almost pushed Huey to the point where like almost broke completely. That I think sets Butcher up for the arc that he has for the rest of the season, which is learning to tone it down just a little bit and step back sometimes and be a little bit more emotionally open and less of like just a single-minded machine.
Yeah. And I mean, Butcher, I mean, I don't really consider myself like anything like Butcher, but he's like full stop character in the whole show. And I understand the point of tunnel vision, get to my wife at all costs. And while I understand that, like I'm fooling everyone else's side. Like you can't throw them under the bus just for your wife again. Um, like because the big thing Calderon talked about in who plays Butcher talked about in interviews, leading up to the release of the show was, yeah, this is about Butcher and what he is willing to do to get his wife back. And I'm like, that's interesting because with season one, it was him doing anything just to avenge his wife. And like he sacrifices his whole team. Um, and when his plan doesn't work out, he just says screw it and tries to blow himself up um, at the end of season one, all in all in service of avenging his wife. And now he has a chance to get her back, and she's alive. And while he would want to just throw caution to the wind and take that same approach, to get her back, he deep down he knows he can't do that again. Like he can't just run his team over like under the bus and just um dehumanize him for the sake of getting his wife back.
Yeah. And like so much of that I feel really comes together neatly in the finale. And like that includes a lot of things where pretty much every major interaction. Sorry, my dog got in here. Knock it off. Pretty much every interaction that Butcher has with pretty much anybody comes down to that idea of like other people telling him and like getting him to realize that he really is uncompromising in like a bad way. And so like his stuff with Huey is that, and his conversations with Becca revolve around that, and how he needs to like let go, like not completely, but to like learn to tone down this like relentless drive that he has. And that goes all the way up to the conversation that he has with Stan Edgar in the finale, where Stan Edgar's like, you've got the privilege to basically be a crazy person and go nuts and like just pursue a goal violently, relentlessly, nonstop. I can't do that for multiple reasons. And like it's really, and the stuff with his dad in the prior episode, and like that's how Butcher could turn out if he just commits fully to this idea of looking out for what he wants and being again like just completely uncompromising. And I feel like it was a really nice, like not in your face arc for him, but pretty much everything we do with Butcher is progressing him in a really natural way with all of the different relationships that he has, and just hammering in for him the fact that he needs to change until finally, I think, by the end, he seems to, if not have embraced that change, at least be more open to it.
Definitely more open to it. Yeah, I love everything we do with Butcher in the finale. Like
Hmm.
him, at first he makes the deal with Edgar and is like, "Yep, I'm gonna give you guys that soup freak, that abomination of a son. Like with, I'm gonna hand you guys Ryan. I just want my wife back. And even though I know that's gonna hurt Becca, I want her, so I'm going through with this. And like Becca makes him swear to her, and I love that he goes back and just can't go through with it. Um, so when Ryan tries to stop Stormfront from killing his mom and ends up killing his mom anyway, uh,
Yeah.
Butcher Butcher's first reaction is to, even though like his wife just, she basically, her dying wish is for Butcher to do right by her son and take care of him and let him know that it's not his fault what's happened. And his his first reaction is to pick up that crowbar and
Mhm.
just go after him. And had Homelander not shown up, I think he either would have tried to go at the kid and Ryan freaks out and kills him out of self-defense, or um like Ryan just kind of stands there crying as Butcher tries to kill him even though he's impervious and can't be killed. um
Yeah. And like
so
that scene, I really love again for like how not in your face it is. Where like you can read into it what's happening, but the show doesn't shove it at you, which is like he's about to do that, and he absolutely, you're right, would have done that had Homelander not shown up. But then Homelander comes, and again, this ties with stuff we've been doing previously, like all the stuff with Butcher and Starlight is great, and she compares him to Homelander, and I think Butcher sees this kid's other father figure pretty much come in, and you can tell when Homelander's like, Ryan, did you do this? Come here. Like, Homelander's probably gonna commit some violence against Ryan or try to. And Ryan walks over to Butcher, and Homelander's like, you're gonna sacrifice yourself for this kid who murdered your wife? And Butcher, I think, can finally see a little bit of himself in Homelander, where he's like, this guy wants to kill this kid, and that was me 5 seconds ago. Oh my god, I can't be like this guy.
and I think this is a really interesting place to take Butcher for next season. I don't know if you like, because I've talked about this with some people in Facebook groups dedicated to this show. um I was like, yeah, I'm really excited for the prospect of Butcher now having to raise Ryan as Soup, and he is just now, at the very least, trying to get over his hatred and bigotry of Soup's. And they were like, yeah, no, like he literally just sent off the kid in a van, like he's probably gonna get sent to a foster home. Do you think that's where we go with it, or do you think that Butcher will actually try to be in this kid's life, aside
I
from just protecting him and make sure he's with a good family?
I feel like by virtue of the fact that Ryan is too interesting of a character to just leave off screen, Butcher and he are going to have some kind of continued interaction. I don't think Butcher is necessarily going to seek out a relationship with him, because I still think even at the very end he feels what he said to Becca in the earlier scene, which is he doesn't want to infect Ryan with like his issues. And I feel like that's still something that he's rightfully concerned could happen. And he really is not the best father figure for this kid to have. So I think he's probably going to be resistant to it for that reason. But I'm almost certain that at some point they're going to be having scenes together again.
Yeah, and I really like that, as like you put it in really good terms. Like it really shouldn't just be a light switch where like he's now finally able to like fully accept Ryan and everything,
Mm-hmm.
because the reason he sends Ryan off with Mallory and doesn't just, leave him, orphaned and stranded is because like he doesn't verbalize promising to Becca right before she dies, but it's clear like he's going to honor that. Like he can't just, let Ryan just, let whatever happen to Ryan, because Becca it's Becca's last wish, and he's gonna honor that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hop over, if I may, back to Huey. I really I really like where we end him because through the majority of the season, I'm like, Huey really isn't a main character. He was kind of our eyes in for the first season, and like I like us finally resolving his issues with Butcher by the end of episode 3. But as we were moving further through the season, I'm like, he's our eyes in, but he's not super. Uh, I mean, outside of the thing he's got going on with Annie, super interesting in his own right as a character, and like is I'm not. I wouldn't go as far as to say I'm wondering what he's doing in the show, but I'm like, he's kind of one of. I mean, Uh, he's not uninteresting, but I'm like, we could. I don't know. I'm liking other characters a lot more, and we need to do.
Not as much pathos with him as there is with everyone else.
Yeah, you need more meat on the bones for Huey to make him feel relevant, like he really needs to be here. Um, so I like that he's still going to actively be going against Vought. Um, and obviously he's gonna probably interact with the boys again at some point in season 3, but like he's coming at it from a different angle on his own, striking out on his own, and I like that.
Yeah, like I've no doubt that they're going to continue like having some kind of working relationship, but it'll be interesting to finally have like a main character tackling them from that perspective because we've got some of it with Mallory kind of, but like someone who really is like on the level of like the legislation and trying to get the law changed and trying to make wider systemic changes, and that's a perspective that I think the show needs versus what we've had up to now, which is great, which is we've got like people like Starlight and Maeve on the inside and showing us people who try and maybe fail to change things within Vought the company, and the boys who are very hands-on, violent, like trying to take things out, like execute people just directly. It'll be nice going into season 3 to have someone who will spend a lot of screen time with on the political angle.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I think we can probably hop over to Starlight. I'd like to
Uh,
talk about her.
all right, go ahead.
All right, so in the comics, she really doesn't do much of anything. Like she has no real bearing on the story outside of being romantically involved with Huey. Um, and that's it. That's really it. She's she kind of she's kind of cowering before Seven and Vought literally the entire time is not really proactive at all whatsoever. Um, completely caves and gives up. Um, whenever Huey whenever there's like relationship stuff that's not working out between them, like in the comic, Huey finds out about the the blowjob that she didn't only give. Well, Deep wasn't even a character in the comic, but she gave a blowjob to A Train, Homelander, and Black Noir like all at once, back to back, and Huey finally sees footage of that. It happened before they were even together, but she just caves and doesn't handle that situation really well, and it's really bad writing. And we get to Starlight here. Well, she was great in season 1, but here we really see her double down in um, trying to take down Vought and also maintain at least some semblance of being a good person. Um, and that's she's struggling with that, and I just I really like it. I really like it. I'm not even sure what else I can say, but like it's really good. I like the back and forth she has with A Train, and how she basically puts him in his place and puts things in perspective. Like, yeah, you've got dirt on me, I've got dirt on you. Like, this isn't going to go anywhere unless you want to go down with me. So um
Yeah, I loved all the stuff we did with her this season, and like again, this is less egregious with her than it is with the season as a whole. But here you also get the sense of just so many things and so many different relationships that she has that like she's bouncing between. Like there's her and Maeve, we get a bit of her and Stormfront at the start, her and the conflict with A Train, her and Huey, and like the foiling that we do with her and Butcher, which is great stuff. And again, I really like the way that that all comes together, and the sense of one little thing that I really, really appreciated was in her last scene with Huey, where he comes in and sees her at the park and she's got the cross back on. And where he's like, if Billy Butcher can do something good, then there must be a higher power. And like even taken beyond any sort of like actually overt religiosity, she and like I mentioned this to you when we were talking about it a couple days ago in the episode where she and Butcher spend a lot of time together, episode 6. She compares him with Homelander, and then she's really adamant that they have no similarity, where she's like, you and me are nothing alike, because she's not wrong, again, that there are things that Butcher and Homelander have in common. And so if Starlight is like Butcher in any way, then that means to her that she's like Homelander, and she can't bear that idea. But to see Butcher at the end do something like genuinely selfless and come out the other side a better guy, that allows her to sort of resolve the conflict that she's had of like, how can a god exist in like a world that makes us all do such terrible things? Seeing Butcher like do something good lets her have faith again, not just in general, but like in herself and her ability to be a good person. And we just sum it up with just that little detail that she's wearing the cross again. I really like that.
yeah, which is really nice given that, in an effort to save Huey, she ends up having to kill an innocent man. So just so they can
Hmm.
get a ride to the hospital.
Yeah. And like she has that discussion in the car where she's like, I've gotten to this place now where I don't even worry about it. I just like I think kind of bitterly on that guy. I'm like, how dare he get in our way? And it's good that she has that self-awareness, but it's still really sad to see that transition happen.
Um, I would. Who should we? Yeah, let's just get it. Let's get the deep out of the way since we're on members of the seven right now, and then we can hop
Yeah,
back to the
true.
boys.
And so like we talked about and how people are right to say that the way we handle the deep is probably the biggest issue with the season, and that the whole Church of the Collective thing.
It's all set up. It's all just set up.
Well, to see the thing is, I thought that, but now, like with the way that we ended the season, it's set up for the Deep as a character. Sure, maybe I don't know, because when we end the stuff with the leader of the church getting his head blown up, I took that to mean like, all right, we're done with the Church of the Collective. They served their purpose, and that honestly made it feel worse. Like I'd have preferred if it was overtly set up and like, oh, that guy and this whole church will be a thing for season 3. Now I'm not sure if we're ever going to touch them again in any meaningful way, because like their leaders blown up, A Train and the Deep have both ostensibly left.
That's
So I
not
don't know.
exactly true. Like, I mean, A Train's back in the seven, but Deep isn't, and that's the whole reason he joined the collective in the first place. And that woman who was helping him with the wife auditions is still alive. So,
That's
I
true. But knowing the Deep's character, I don't know if he'd have the patience to like continue working with any of them after that little blow up he had.
maybe you'll have to wait and see. I still feel like all of that needs to. You can't just drop that, especially since Church of the Collective. Like, it's been said that it's like not a metaphor for Scientology, but like their way of tackling that kind of thing. And
Yeah, it's like a
so far,
proxy
it's
for
been,
Scientology.
yeah, so far it's been obnoxiously vague. And so I would like to, um, well, just because I would like for them to delve into it more doesn't necessarily mean they will. But I'm just saying, um, I think they're going to lean a little more into that next season, and we're going to do something with them in the deep. Because it a lot of that stuff, like to make the audience sit through that just so we can finally figure out who the heck is blowing people up, I think is dumb.
Yeah, and like I like getting that reveal, and I think
The
it's
reveal is like super shocking. Like, of course, none of us saw that coming, but
mhm.
to make the audience sit through all those Church of Collective scenes when they have very little to no bearing on the actual story of this season, only for you to drop all of it next season is really lame. And I think for the most part, this show would be better than that.
Yeah. See, what it felt like to me was, and like again, I hope you're right, and that the show is better than that, and that we have things to do with it later. But what it felt like to me was we don't really have an idea of what else to do with the deep that ties into what everyone else is doing. And we have a couple of things that we can have A Train do that ties into everyone else, but not a lot. So let's just come up with something that'll occupy those two characters for several episodes. And then when we don't need it anymore, we'll get rid of it. That's what it felt like to me. Again, I hope it's not that. I hope the best case scenario right now is that that does have implications for next season. But the way that it read coming off the finale was just like, oh, we didn't really have plans for the Deep and A Train, but we couldn't just toss them aside. So we needed to give them their little like D plot apart from everyone else and only bring them in occasionally.
Well, for me, it feels like they have less of a. I mean, they essentially just minimized A Train's role, but it feels like they're at the very least more interested in paying service in that to that character than they are the Deep, because, um, like he goes through what he goes through, gets kicked out of the seven, and then he just gets to go right back to the seven again, and it wasn't really that hard for him. He just had to steal a file. Um, but yeah, like so when A Train starts the season, we eventually we go and we get to episode 3 after he gets out of his coma. He's got the whole back and forth with Starlight, and then like those two are kind of at a stalemate because they both have dirt on each other. Um, and we get to the chase scene with the tunnels, and the only reason our heroes aren't caught and killed is because he's having heart problems and he can't maintain his speed. Um, so he's kind of he's kind of just a plot device in that sense, and then we kind of just sit on him and kick him out of seven, and then sit on him again, and he's in the Church of the Collective, but he's not really doing much of anything until he finally gets the file, and then now he's actually relevant, and then they move him back into the seven. So I feel like um, they had to sideline him to make a majority of, maybe not even a majority as much as just episode 3 with the whole chase thing, but they sideline him for the sake of the story that they're telling, and then they throw him right back in. So I feel like they also killed his replacement. So
Yeah.
I think that they definitely have an idea for what they want to do with A Train. He just he couldn't be a mainstay um, for this season and them still do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I think it's also an interesting idea, and like not necessarily saying the show is doing this on purpose, but like how of all of the main characters, A Train and the Deep are the most like self-focused and not really like they have relationships, but they don't really come in with like all of the interpersonal conflicts of everyone else does. They're very look out for themselves. And so of course the plot that they get would involve not really interacting with anyone else.
um, yeah, I mean, for the majority of the time I was watching this season, during a lot of the A Train stuff, I was like, this cannot be as fun to play as first season was. Because first
Definitely
season,
not. Yeah.
you you're dealing with the kind of metaphor for the athlete thing of like trying to stay on top, maintain your top spot, and you go as far as having to kill your own girlfriend. but you're so narcissistic and toxic that you blame anyone and everyone else for your screw ups and your choices. Um, and all that stuff is interesting in a way that nothing he does this season ever really is. Um,
Yeah.
so I hope that whatever they have planned for A Train, it's more involved and more interesting. Um,
Hmm.
I would like to talk about Queen
Since we're
Maeve.
still on the 7, you want to do Maeve?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you cleared up a big issue that I had coming out of the finale initially. So when we first got the finale and I watch it, um, a big hang up for me was that Queen Maeve shows up out of nowhere, somehow knows exactly where everyone is so that she can come and help. And like at the beginning of the episode, when Huey and Starlight go to ask her to go on the record against Vought, she tells them basically to F off and like, no, I'm not helping you. I'm tired. Nothing we do ever works. There's no point. You can't change anything. And then off screen, she just has this change of heart and she's suddenly there fighting with all the girls and girls get it done. And that moment actually works now that you've put in perspective of why she is there. But
Mm-hmm.
when I initially watched that, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. But like, why the heck is she here? What changed her mind? Um, what because as far as I knew, like we get that scene, and then she changed her mind off screen for no reason, and she's suddenly helping fight Stormfront. Um, but it was the news breaking that she's actually a Nazi. That's what sets her off, and why she goes to track down Stormfront and I guess beat her up for a while. Um,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, because like presumably Maeve, at least by herself, maybe she can kill her. Um, I mean, she definitely can't kill Homelander, but like maybe she'd have a shot at killing Stormfront. Um, but like, yeah, that was an epic moment, and like now that you've clarified why she actually went down there, because initially I was like, we needed a scene with Elena. Maybe Elena calls her or talks to her, like shows up and talks to her and puts
Yeah.
things in perspective for her, and like now she has like this tangible reason for why she is deciding to go and help the group. But yeah, like now
And
that
like I
that's
don't blame you for that because it's again like it really could have been conveyed better because like it's one of the few things where I'd say the show was maybe a little bit too subtle for its own good because I've been praising it so far, especially in the finale for not rubbing things in your faces and being subtle and letting little moments speak for larger ideas. But I think there really could have been something because what I think makes it just clear enough is that we get a reaction shot of her like staring down Stormfront as she walks through the halls of Vought as all the news comes out. And then what she says as she appears to like fight her is like, hey, Kraut. So it's like clearly the Nazi thing is what gets her.
yeah.
And so like even if she's like I mentioned, like paralyzed by her depression pretty much, and rightfully so with all she's been through, she's still like, okay, this is literally it's Godwin's law in action here. This is the thing where you don't just sit around and do nothing. Like you go out and you punch Nazis in the face. That's what you do if you're a halfway decent person. But you're right. She could have used like a scene, maybe like a line of dialogue to that effect with Starlight. Like Starlight herself asks, like, "Why are you here?" It's like, do the Nazis show up? You got to punch the Nazis. Like that could have been like a 2 second exchange, and I think that would have cleared it up just fine.
Yeah, especially because um like overall I'm not really super satisfied with where we took Maeve, if we even really took her anywhere this season, because
Yeah.
Homelander outs her, and then she's got to put up this charade because she's not really a lesbian, she's bisexual.
Hmm.
Um,
And like we
and
have that great moment where like Ashley walks in on her and like, "What are you doing? This is not on brand." And like you really feel for Maeve like having her sexual identity turned into a brand for this company. and like all that stuff is great, but it there's something about the way we handle her this season. You're right. It doesn't. It feels partially like a retread of season one
Yeah,
of
we
just
just don't do enough with it. Like
yeah,
we move Elena out of the show, like she's got to leave or whatever, and then that plot line is just kind of you know stolid, stale. Like it doesn't go anywhere. It's just there. You know.
yeah, and like the ending scene where it's her and Starlight at the press conference, and like they've got Homelander over a barrel pretty much, and he's got to call them like his best friends. That's satisfying, but unlike a lot of other people, I don't leave the finale with like a sense of what Maeve is gonna do next, and I wish we had an idea of that.
Yeah. It can she actually live a semi decent um private romantic life with Elena? Is that too much to try and do given her current situation and the fact that she's still with Vought?
Yeah,
Um,
like this is the plan that she pitched to Elena. Like
and
now that she's done it, how's
yeah,
that gonna shake out?
now that she finally has Homelander's what's in a vice, um, she can just choose to leave Vought. Like she doesn't really even really have to stay. Um,
The one reason I could see her staying is maybe because Starlight stays and she wants her to have backup.
maybe, but like she doesn't. They're not really friends. Like she doesn't owe Starlight anything.
No,
But
like
she
the
thinks
impression I get of Maeve is that she cares about Annie, but again, like just the complete disillusionment that she has gets in her way so much. So like it's not that she needs to owe Starlight anything to want to help her, but it's
well,
gotta
no, she
be
saved her life, and she didn't have to do that. She saved her life from Black Noir. But
yeah,
I'm just
but like
saying,
it's gotta have a motivation that's strong enough to counter just how deeply ingrained her like sense of defeat is.
and I don't think like I love Starlight, and I think she may have a slight effect on me, but I don't think Starlight is enough for her to stay in the seven.
Yeah.
With
Yeah, if it
everything
was
she's
gonna
been
be
through,
anything
and
like
Homelander
that,
lording over her and threatening
yeah,
every relationship she's had since, like I don't buy that Starlight is enough to get her to stay if she really wants to leave.
yeah. I think it'll be interesting if we open next season and it's like Maeve is just like, okay, I did what I had to do. Now I'm really like I'm out of here.
If we can find a compelling way to make her stay, then fine. But Starlight is not it.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess we might as well cover the big elephant in the room for me and you, and I think that's Ryan. Now that we've more or less covered all the seven,
Yeah, I don't so much like I wouldn't call Ryan a big elephant in the room for me. I'm a little torn on parts of how we handle him, but for the most part I like what we do with him. And again, I'm fully expecting that we'll get more of him. So like any issues I might have may be addressed later. But yeah, so like how are you feeling about it right now?
well, I mean, yeah, like maybe you're right. Like that's not necessarily the best wording because it's not straight up bad what we do with Ryan, but I'm definitely conflicted about it too, mainly because we spent so long away from it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, that's the big thing is like we spend at least two solid episodes with no scenes of Ryan and Becca, and it's a little weird.
um, especially because like we get some nuances of like she has him reading out all the continents and things and like there's all these small little tidbits um but I think we need to get a genuine sense, and it's weird because like she doesn't want him to be Homelander, but she's not even willing to discuss the fact that he has powers at all. And so um like she wants to raise him to be a good person, um and like the complete opposite of Homelander. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think a slightly problematic thing is us not really getting to really see any of that, and then um, her her just like lying. Like I understand the lying thing, um, but then as you say, like it's a reasonable reaction for a kid to like react poorly once he finds out his mom's been lying to him all these years, and then decides to go off with Homelander and Stormfront. But like to sidestep the powers thing and like you're not willing to talk that through with him at all, and like I don't know, that's a lot of that stuff just
Yeah, I feel
not rubs me
like
the wrong way, but I feel like it could be.
it's a thing where the
Yeah, go
show
ahead,
could
Nick.
again. I was just gonna say, like, I think what you're getting at is that it's a thing where the show could have once again dedicated maybe a scene or a bit of a discussion to why are Ryan's powers something that Becca refuses to talk to him about? Where the way that she raises him, you get the sense is like the complete polar opposite extreme of Homelander, where he was raised by people who only cared about his powers, only viewed him as a commodity, did not care how he turned out morally or philosophically or like his views on social issues or whatever. Whereas Becca, and like what I really like is that bit with the Lego film of the Blind Side that he has, because that tells you a lot in a very little like creative way, which is like the media that Becca chooses to expose him to. She's trying to cultivate like a sense of artistry in him, get him involved in being creative, so that like he's got things about himself that are more than just his job or his existence as this set of powers, but someone, and I don't know, maybe it did because I haven't watched episode 4 in a little bit, but someone like Butcher or somebody should have just asked Becca, like, do you really think it's a good idea to not talk about his powers, period? Because that's a part of who he is, and you're maybe screwing him up in a completely different way by just ignoring it.
Yeah, like she says when Butcher's like, we can use the fence, and she's like, Ryan can't climb that fence, and Butcher's like, oh, what about his powers? And she's like, oh, I'm not raising him like that. And it's like, powers don't automatically equal bad person. Like, we have Kimiko, and I know what Homelander did to you, but you gotta know that not every single soup is like that.
Yeah, like the reason I would assume that she does that is she's thinking, okay, worst case scenario, if like what I'm doing here doesn't work and Ryan does grow up into a not great person, then at least he won't know how to use his powers to hurt people the way Homelander does. But she seems to have enough faith that that wouldn't happen, and even then it's like I feel like part of her would have to know that, especially beyond like the house being fake, beyond like the way that they're living being a lie, you're keeping a massive part of this kid's existence from him. I feel like the character is smart enough to know that that's setting herself up for a problem, and like when Homelander comes back, that's giving him like a little edge up on her. Is like, okay, this is something that he's willing and able to talk with Ryan about. Maybe you could have taken that card out of Homelander's deck had you done that first.
Yeah. And like one thing I really like is even though he's really twisted and manipulative and like he throws Ryan off of um the roof, and that whole thing is awful. Like even though he knows that his son's impervious, like you don't know. Like we don't really know how that works. Your powers might not transfer over. Um
Yeah,
well, we do
yeah,
have.
that's true. Where it's like Homelander's willing to go far and like experiment. That like Ryan could have been put in actual danger. Maybe you could have avoided that if he'd gotten the chance to test things out sooner in a safer way.
And it one thing I really do like though, Homelander does clearly, well, I would say before the finale, it well not even before the finale, but like before the scene where Homelander realizes that he just killed Stormfront or like seriously like mutilated her, um, he does appear to genuinely love that kid.
Mm-hmm. And like it's this interesting thing of he says I love you near the start of the season, and you get the feeling of like he says that just to say it and because he feels like he should and he doesn't really have that sense. But then as they
Yeah,
actually
he's trying
spend a
to
little
figure that
time,
out. He
yeah,
knows that's what fathers say to sons, but he doesn't feel that in his bones because he didn't get to experience it.
and like it's this really interesting bit where again this is a lot in the finale of when Ryan has that moment of getting terrified by the crowd. And the first time that Homelander really fully emotionally opens up to anybody, like even Stormfront, he's never had this moment of complete openness with, where it's like for the first time, Homelander sees someone who is like him and could grow up to be like him. And he's like, oh, this is what actual love feels like. And then when he says it in that scene, it feels genuine and like he knows what he's talking about. And that's a really interesting scene to have with this character who, for so much of the show, is just this complete hateable monster. Even if he's really fascinating to watch, it's just like, no, that was actually really sweet. And it's really interesting to see that Homelander has that in him.
One thing I do really like, and it's debatable whether or not he's any worse or better than Stormfront, but one thing I really liked is that he is clearly and decisively not her. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't like he's kind of taken aback and he doesn't protest it, but he's clearly not into Stormfront trying to groom Ryan into a racist.
Yeah. And like even when it's just him and Stormfront alone, you get the sense where again his whole thing is he just really wants to be loved. And so like the Stormfront is being genuine when she's like, I love you with all of my heart because you represent the thing that I've always wanted to happen. And so he just accepts that. But even when they're just kind of talking and she'll occasionally say a thing, he'll get this look of like, okay, I'm going to let that slide because you give me what I want emotionally, but I'm not exactly there with you when you say that.
Yeah, like Homelander is not racist. Um,
Like
he
he's
wants
willing to tolerate racism for his own ends, which is debatably just as bad. And that's also an interesting thing that he has in common with Stan Edgar, where I'll talk more to this just about. Well, I mean, I guess I'll just briefly say this now, which is like I find it interesting that the note we end the season on still feels a little foreboding, not even because of Homelander, and not even because I'm sure Stormfront's still alive somewhere, like whether or not she can do anything, but because Stan Edgar is in a lot of ways just as bad or worse than both of them because for as much as he admits, like, yeah, I'm a black man and it sucks that Stormfront is racist and a Nazi, he's still willing to give her what she wants for the sake of the bottom line. And like that's the truest evil there is people who recognize another person's evil and are like, okay, I'll give them whatever they want so long as they give me what I want in the long run. And
yeah,
he's still around.
it's
He
just
hasn't
about the
been,
money for him. He's a
yeah,
cold, calculating businessman.
yeah, and like he hasn't taken any damage. Like he leaves this season undented, and like Vought, the company, as far as we know, is in the clear. And so it's like, really, how are we gonna fix that? Because that's the big problem.
Yeah, how are they gonna take down Bot? And since you brought up Bot, I'd like to round back to Butcher really quick
Mm,
because I so in the comics, right? In the comics, the group the boys are funded by the government, and they have Susan is a constant point of contact for Butcher, kind of like their liaison. She's dead in the show. Like they killed her in the premiere of season two, but it looks like Mallory is more or less filling that role in the show, and
yeah,
she offers pretty much that exact thing to Butcher. Um, and it was really cool to get that because I didn't think we would ever get there in this show. I thought the boys would always just operate independently. Um, that's one of the things they've now put from the comics that I really like is that they get a little money to play with from the government, and they're kind of like this unofficial special ops team for soups.
Yeah,
Bully didn't even come out and verbally accept the offer, um, and Huey's not going to be a part of the team. Mother's Milk is Mother's Milk is back with his family, and Huey and Kimiko have now gone off into the sunset. So the group is divided at the start of season 3. Um, Obviously, there's probably going to be something that's going to bring them back together, but it's interesting to like give them that cool thing from the comics that I didn't think we would ever really see. I
mm,
think we'll somehow eventually get there where like they're all back together and in that group, and they're receiving money from the government, so they have a little more resources and more stuff to play with in their fight for Vought. Oh, against Vought, I should say.
yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how long the legs on this show are, just conceptually, because I think with Huey in the position that he's in, and with the boys presumably becoming more of an official thing, like these past 2 seasons we've spent with them being, underground, sort of like the scrappy, like the spanner in the works of Vought. But we really are eventually, if by season 3 or 4, probably going to get to a place where, okay, their position is a little bit more official. They've got a little bit more backing. How how much power can they reasonably have before they eventually do either beat Vought or just nothing else is going to work?
And see, the comic does have a definitive ending. Um, so I imagine the show, especially he's such a huge fan of the comic. Obviously he's not going to follow it, but I think he does, or not even necessarily that he does right, but he will eventually work out a definitive place to take the end of this series.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if he had an idea in mind already, but this is not necessarily a show that I see going for like 5, 6, 7 seasons.
No, I think 5. If we even get to 5, I think that's the sweet spot. Because Eric Kripke has talked at length about shows wearing their welcome, and they keep going just because they can, and because of
Ironically,
that, the
like
story continues.
Supernatural, which he worked on and is currently on season 15.
Yeah, but like he left that show a long time ago in someone else's hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who have we not talked about? We got a lot of good stuff with Mother's Milk this season.
Yeah, like the scene, I think in episode 4 with him and Annie is really
Hmm.
great, and then later on when he talks to the black elderly woman about his father, so we get a taste of his backstory and his spot and what kind of motivates Mother's Milk to be doing what he's doing.
Yeah. And like, I find it really interesting, and this is just something that occurred to me again with the conversation that Stan Edgar and Butcher had about sort of Butcher's privilege as a white guy. Is like, again, this another show that was like a little more sloppy could have so easily made that kind of racial commentary like a thing throughout the season that's like constantly focused on. But here I like that we just kind of let it sit in the way that the black characters are portrayed, where it's like Edgar has that line of like, I can't afford to like be violent and like lash out like a psychopath. That's a white man's luxury. And that's kind of reflected in the other characters, where it's like Stan Edgar feels like he has to capitulate to this person who hates him in the form of Stormfront. A Train is that guy who does get violent occasionally and does kind of lash out emotionally, and he's constantly suffering for it more than anyone else on the team does. And Mother's Milk in
Mother's
the
Milk.
boys. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say that, yeah, Mother's Milk early on in the season, he is like he gets in Huey's face and gets damn near physical with him whenever Huey tries to, you know, bring up some kind of plan to actively keep going after Vought when he just wants to keep his head down so that he can get to his family.
Yeah, like more than anyone else, Mother's Milk is the guy who really has to watch himself, and he's kind of like the dad for the team, pretty much, just because by virtue of who he is, he has to be the most mature because he doesn't have the luxury of like having emotional outbursts the way anyone else does. And like I love that that's a thing that doesn't go spoken. The show doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's just there for you to pick up. But
I So his goal was for him to, um, hopefully take down Vought and then get back to his kids. He accomplished one and not really the other.
yeah,
Um,
like they
so
struck a blow against Vought from the inside, if not publicly. But like, just the guy earned a break. So ooh.
yeah. And what's interesting we haven't even talked about yet is so their main goal of first season was getting a sample of Compound V and exposing it, which we
Mm,
accomplished in episode 3 of the season, and it is quickly swept over with some PR crap that's put out by Edgar in the exact same episode.
yeah,
And
and that's another reason that dropping the first three to start with was a good idea, not just the Stormfront stuff, but like, all right, we accomplished the goal of season one, and then pulling the rug out from everybody is like, of course they have a contingency for that. So now the status quo is shifted, but the boys are still not really any better off than they were before.
yeah, and Butcher has like a hysterical reaction to it when well, Mother's Milk and Frenchie are both like really excited and congratulating Huey, and Butcher's like, yeah, good job.
Good
He's like,
job.
"Oh, that's it, really
Really good
nice one,
job.
and all right, really nice one, and he's like, all right, when this is all over, I'll, I'll get a top shelf bottle of lube and tickle your balls and keep you yourself.
That's great. But like again,
It's
it's right because like Butcher has the perspective of like we did this thing and maybe it struck a fatal blow against Bob, but we've got to be prepared for the inevitability that is they've got something up their sleeves, and of course they did.
And on top of that, they were still dealing with the situation of trying to safely transport Kimiko's brother to the
Mhm.
FBI.
Yeah, which is
Which
maybe
of course
another thing. Which like Kimiko and her brother is maybe another thing that I think suffers a little bit from just having to bounce around between stuff so much and letting certain things sit for a while without going touched on. Where it's like the Stormfront kills her brother in episode 3, and we get that bit in episode 4 where she like goes up and is about to like try and attack her at a rally, but Frenchie stops her. And then for the next couple episodes, it sort of focused on their relationship, and like the whole having lost her brother of it all, I felt like got a little lost in the shuffle.
I don't really think it got lost in the shuffle. I feel like um, because there's not much more to tell the audience on Kimiko's side. She's grieving and she's angry that she lost her brother. So we move over to Frenchie, the other side of the relationship, and we basically flesh him out. We do the whole backstory episode, episode 6, and we know that Frenchie is someone who is kind of tortured by past trauma and guilt, mainly the guilt of what happened with Mallory's grandkids and how that was on him. And he's kind of been trying to do recompense for that ever since. And Kimiko is just like the latest iteration of that. And Cherie is kind of like friend slash fling, like in perspective for him. Like she she just needs to grieve. Like you trying to kiss her after her brother just died was that's like a no go. Like of course she's
Definitely
gonna.
the kind of decision one makes on coke.
Yeah, that's how we opened that episode. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, and like just That's probably my favorite stuff of the season, and that's saying a lot because I really like so much of it. But the episode 6 with all the flashback stuff and like finally confronting Lamplighter and like all that stuff, I just loved it so much.
Um, I was. I mean, I assume he more than likely would have been killed if he went to that like the Congress lady who was blowing up everyone's heads probably would have blown him up too if he lived and had shown up there to testify.
Hmm.
So like in the moment I was like, oh, we killed him off. But like in the full context of the whole story, I'm like, oh yeah, he probably would have died there anyway.
Yeah. And like I kind of expected Sean Ashmore to be sort of like comparatively a guest star. Like I didn't expect him to be a major role for more than like 2 or 3 episodes, and that's about what we got. And like they gave him some neat stuff to work with for a lot of that. And like
Yeah,
I I,
I
I
really liked him for the little screen time he had. Well, not even little, because like he was given basically a whole like guest star episode.
yeah,
Like
and like it
really,
was
like
interesting to see him be like really full of pathos and like drama in one episode and then allowed to be like largely comedic for the next one.
yeah, it was really good. I oh, we should talk about because like he's not really even a character. I don't think he ever will be, and I kind of like that. But Black Noir, we
Mm,
didn't see a lot of him in season one, and they definitely amended that this season. And Black Noir gets some time to shine.
yeah, he's great. And like it's so interesting that like we learn a lot of details about him, but I still just want to know like what his deal is. To where we end the season and he's unresponsive because of his allergies. And much like Stormfront, I feel like the fact that we don't see him die on screen means he's for sure coming back.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's
for sure.
and it's like still, I just want to know why is he like this, and like how does he like really communicate with anyone besides like we see drawing on paper like what he wants to know about. It's like
I'm
oh man,
I'm 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 fine with the mystery, dude. Like,
yeah, it is,
um,
but like still, it's the reason it works is because I want to know.
yep. I don't ever need to hear him speak.
Yeah.
We don't need a flashback or any of that stuff. Just let him stay mysterious. I think that's cool.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I really liked that we because when I first saw the trailer and Billy goes at him with a crowbar, I'm like, there's no way that fight scene can last any longer than 30 seconds. Sure enough, it definitely doesn't.
Yeah. And like I don't know, it's just it's interesting the way that again he can kind of bounce back and forth between sympathetic and kind of funny and like a odd quirky presence to like really threatening depending on the context, to where
Yeah, like in episode 3 when they show
when
up
the
at the
compound
beach
V
and
comes out and like we get the reaction shot of him like sobbing against the wall, and it's like that says a lot, like that says a lot about him, and yet still also raises some questions of like, and like I thought that whole bit of everyone reacting to the news about Compound V, from like Black Noir to the Deep, like I thought that was all really great stuff.
I did too. And then the other scene in that episode when the Seven shows up on the beach and the whale is dead, and Black Noir just puts his hand over his heart when he sees the whale dead.
That was great. And it's like it's just so interesting. I'm like, the Seven are just such a interesting dysfunctional group of like completely different personalities, and like I love scenes where it's the whole group of them together.
Um, let's get into the nitty gritty of specifically Homelander.
Yeah.
So when we
Can I
started
just say
season with
before anything else, like I
yeah,
just want to say kudos to like the balls on marketing to let the very first image of this season that we see be him coming down in what's basically like the peak of his story that in the finale, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, they did a really good job marketing the season and not really giving you. Um, I mean, like the only big major scene that they spoil is really the whale scene, but
Yeah,
pretty much everything else, like you don't have like actual context. So that was great. So we start the season with him, and the two big things that we do with Homelander for the majority of this season is A, um, knock him down a peg, and B, see how he reacts to having a son. So mostly the latter, or is it the former? The one with like him getting knocked down a peg with of course Edgar and Stormfront. So with Edgar, he was so sure that he held all the cards and that he was the most important person at VOT, the face of VOT. And Edgar basically puts him in his place and is like, "Yeah, no, we're a pharmaceutical company, buddy. You guys are our little entertainment sector, and the most profitable thing for us, our most profitable asset, that's Compound V.
yeah.
And you really,
I I found that really interesting because I just watched a video that came out like I want to say a month, less than a month ago, and like that made the Disney parallel really explicit. And like they weren't even talking about this show; they were just talking about Disney and how it's like everyone thinks of Disney as a movie company. They're not that. They're primarily like a theme park and service company that makes movies to theme their parks around. And so to have that happen here, but with like people, to where Homelander is like, okay, we're your hot commodity. You got to keep us happy. And they're like, no, you're the thing that we cultivate to sell our real commodity. So you're what we like integrate. You're what we use to interface with the public. But like, you're not our number one thing, guys. So sit back down. It's really interesting.
and also with Stormfront. So in the comics, Stormfront is a dude, and I think it's issue 31. Hold on, let me actually go back and look. So I don't know if you remember it or not, but the poster of so there's a poster that they used to promote season two, and it's basically a bunch of wanted posters for all the boys. You know what I'm
Yes, I
talking
found.
about? Okay. That's lifted straight from a comic, particularly. Hold on, I'm pretty sure it's issue. Oh wow, it's deep down. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's issue 31. I want to double check and make sure. Um, but yeah, that is the issue where Stormfront first shows up in the comics, and I just think it was really cool that they used that to promote the show.
Yeah.
Like it not only is an accurate representation as to what's going on in the season, like they are wanted, but it's also the first issue where Stormfront even shows up in the story, so it's like it matches up perfectly.
Hmm. But the thing I find interesting about Stormfront is, like I said, with the sort of the Homelander as proxy for Superman stuff, it's again it's this neat little bit of commentary. And the thing that makes Stormfront like really terrifying is that unlike a lot of Nazis, she's actually really intelligent. And the thing about like her whole public persona is, I think this, without meaning to, possibly intentionally cuts to the core of why I think people have trouble writing a Superman for the 21st century, or like why maybe some people who are like younger find it difficult to integrate with Superman as a character, which is again in like modern social media age where so much of the public is so clued into maybe not the workings of what's going on, but like social issues, and like everyone's organizing and things are like political and social strife are like at an all-time high. Your big number one superhero shouldn't necessarily be the Superman type that like Homelander tries to be, where they do the thing, they drop down, they say a few words, and then they leave. It should be like Stormfront, who like organizes and radicalizes people and like starts up rallies and protests. And like that's really interesting. It's like a Superman or Superwoman in this case who really knows how to utilize not just social media, but like the social dynamics of 2020 pretty much in a way that Homelander doesn't fully understand yet because he's still quote unquote classic Superman in that sense.
Yeah, I really liked where we eventually took. Well, I'm actually I'm not conflicted. But I'm not even sure how I feel about where we have Homelander by the end
Yeah,
because
agreed.
so we yeah so we get Stormfront to like first of all that relationship is really interesting. Like we we think they're first gonna like butt heads after she starts stealing his thunder and undermining him and making fun of him with all the memes, and like he's losing appeal with the public, especially after that video of him like killing an innocent while killing a terrorist comes out, and um, so when Stormfront when he finally starts listening to her and they cultivate this weird messed up relationship, um, he he goes back to a doppelganger, which by the way, that whole conceit was so insane and
Mhm.
ludicrous and effed up.
Yep. I was
When he's
surprised.
living.
It was a
Go
really
ahead.
interesting choice to wait until the second scene with him to reveal that it was a shapeshifter because we end that first scene and I'm like, what happened? Was she not really dead? Was it a clone? It's like really interesting choice to keep us on edge with that.
Yeah, like I wasn't even questioning it because I was like, I trust this show. They're gonna tell me what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so like yeah, I assumed it was doppelganger. Like, because I know, I mean, I don't know, no, but I had confidence that this was not the kind of show that like it was a clone or it wasn't really her twin
Yeah.
sister, like some
Or
stupid
like
nonsense like that.
he's having an elaborate like dream, like mental break thing that we're
Oh
visualizing
yeah.
for the audience.
And I typically hate when we waste the audience's time with dreams or hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the hallucination that we get later of Homelander, like lasering that crowd
Yeah,
when they start like yelling at him and like they disapprove of him,
that was great.
is actually yeah, is actually pretty necessary because that puts in perspective what he easily could do. And the only thing holding him back from not doing it, and Anthony Starr, who plays the character, has talked about this at length in multiple interviews. Um, like physically, he's the strongest person on the planet, but emotionally, like he's one of the weakest people on the planet, and he wants people's approval. He needs that. Um, so that's the reason he doesn't, just because he knows if he does that, there's no going back. No one will ever trust him or love him again.
Yeah.
But as far as the stuff with Stormfront, him eventually changing him, and then we get to the scene where he's like, "I don't need anyone," and then he kills Doppelganger. Um, I'm like, okay, we're slowly weaning Homelander away from needing that need. 'Cause he's got Stormfront. She's put him in this perspective where it's like, yeah, why should you even care what other people think? Like, what you should be focused on is just making people angry. And he has not only that, but he has Ryan. And then by the end of the season, both are taken from him. Um, so he reverts right back to being that same needy, attention grabbing person that he has always been. And so um, I'm not immediately super interested to see what we do with him next season. Um, like he's, I'm not saying like get Homelander out of the show or anything. Like I don't know why he's
Yeah,
here, but
no.
I'm just saying that he's like we gotta figure out either some way to progress him or give him an interesting storyline because um, we essentially have taken him back to the same place that he more or less started as, where like he doesn't have Stormfront, he doesn't have Ryan, but he seemingly more or less has repaired his image within the public. So everything is kind of back to status quo for him.
The thing about him by the end of this season is, and like I say this as someone who has complete faith in the show writers to like know this character better than me and have a smarter idea than I do about how to move him forward. But just speaking from my own perspective, I feel like you could make the argument that by the end of this season, we've told all the story with Homelander that we can tell. And so, like, I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see what do they come up with. Like, what places are there left to take this person, aside from
Yeah,
he really does just snap and become like violent dictator.
and it's really interesting because like the show has chosen to double down on focusing on the Seven and Homelander so hard. Comic doesn't do that. Um, it's a lot more episodic. They deal with a bunch of random soups, and Homelander is barely even in the book.
Hmm. Interesting. It'd be
Like,
interesting. Maybe he took a backseat next season. Like he still showed up occasionally, but wasn't so much like a main character as he has been.
I wouldn't mind that, but yeah, what I will say is just that's fascinating to me. Like, especially because I came into the show first, obviously, and then I went into the comic thinking, um, like I know they're different mediums, but I was thinking we'd see a lot more of Homelander than we ultimately did, and Homelander is barely in the book. He's barely in the comic. Like I would say he's in maybe a fourth of it, if that.
Hmm. Which I mean, that's an interesting way to tackle it from like again the Superman perspective of he's always looming around. He doesn't exactly get a lot of time to be humanized. He's more like a figure than he is a character. But I this show definitely took the approach that it did and has been working it so far. But now, like we've been saying, we're at a place where it's like, okay, what else is there to do with this guy?
Especially because like the characters want to take him down. How the heck do you do that? He's as of now he's a Superman with no kryptonite.
hmm Like he's got his
Um,
emotional kryptonite, but he's got no real
yeah,
tangible
he's
way to.
the emotional kryptonite, but you gotta think like everyone has a breaking point, and how far do we gotta push Homelander before he gets there? And if he does get there, do we even have a show? Because no one can even stop him. If he wanted to, he could kill everyone and rule the world anyway.
Hmm,
So I just think that's an interesting question to pose, and we'll see how they handle him moving forward.
yeah.
Um,
Have
we
we
haven't.
neglected anything?
Uh, I think. Well, I, there was something I wanted to mention with Kimiko and Frenchie. Oh, well, first of all, I gotta say, um, I think it's Karen Fukuhara. She is incredible. Like, doesn't
Great.
it's so crazy like watching her in interviews and even just like the blogs and stuff that she vlogs she does on YouTube. She's so nice and fun and bubbly, and then they get her in this show and she's a mute. She doesn't say anything, but there is so much going on in her eyes and her physical performance, and it's it's insane how good she is.
Yeah, and like I'll say this whenever she comes up, she's got like so much range. Like it's hard to believe that this role and like all the vocal performances that she does are like the same person. It's like she's great. Like I love her so much. She's really good.
And Frenchie, they I really hope this doesn't happen. I hope we have a fate that's like I don't expect this show to give really anyone the quote unquote happy ending. Um, Heck, we didn't even give Butcher one. Like Becca's dead, but I hope there's something better for where we take Frenchie and Kimiko than what's in the comic. And I will spoil what happens there because it's not like the end of the comic. Um, Frenchie and Kimiko are blown up.
Ah,
Yeah, like they're together in a scene, and then Frenchie's like, "What is that?" Like they're in this apartment complex, and Huey's on his way there. Um, Frenchie like turns like a curtain or whatever that's somewhere in the room, and he sees that someone left a bomb in there, and there's like 2 or 3 seconds left on it. And I think he looks back at Kimiko and he's like something something Monka, like the nickname that he has for her or something like that, and then they both blow up. And
gee.
Huey's thrown back by the blast, and then he's like all catatonic and like can't believe that they're both dead. It's really unfortunate. I don't want that for this iteration of those characters because I love them so much. Like maybe we can't give them. Oh heck, screw it. Let them have the happy ending. If any two people, should get that, those two should get it.
Yeah. And it's like,
Like after seeing them walk off into the sunset and like leaving the shop behind like they do at the end of the season, I'm like, yep, they can just go off into the sunset. I'd be happy with that. I'd be so happy with that.
yeah. And that's one of those things where, again, on one hand, if they were to do it, I trust this like team working on this show to do it well, but I also trust them to not do it and be smarter than that. So if it happens or it doesn't happen, I'm sure it'll feel better in the show and like more earned.
Um, what? Oh yeah, we didn't touch on the crazy Homelander and Stormfront sex scene that they sold in the trailer.
That was certainly a scene. I don't even have too much to say about it. It was pretty crazy.
Um, I'm just I continue to be impressed that there's so many things like that in this show that they throw in just because they can and they know it's never been done before. Um,
Or
like
at least
the show
not to this degree. Because like what that gave me vibes of is actually sort of another superpowered sex scene that we had in the movie Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp.
I didn't see that.
That had a similar sort of scene where like two vampires did it, but this one
Uh,
took that and like took it up to 11 pretty much.
well, when I say never seen before, I guess I just mean for specifically this genre.
Ah,
Like
okay.
Marvel, DC, like the two big mainstreams that everyone knows and is familiar with, like never would have had a scene like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest thing we've gotten to that is Deadpool.
Yeah, 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 that's probably the closest. You're right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really like this season overall. Um, Maybe I mean this might sound like me saying I like it less than I do, but it didn't live up necessarily to like all the anticipation that I had for it. Um, but I will say it ended up being my favorite season of television this year so far,
Mm.
like hands down. Um, so I'm excited for season 3. I hope they can film it safely, even though we're in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, that's the big issue with everything these days is how much do we want more versus how much do we not want these actors to catch a virus and die?
Yeah, or even just further impede filming because once a major cast member catches it, they're kind of
Mhm.
stuck in limbo until they test negative,
Or even crew members.
or crew members. Yeah, so
But yeah,
we'll see, man.
I'd say this season lived up to my anticipation in the sense that like I enjoyed every minute of watching it, even the stuff that I have criticisms about. And like, in no way would I say that it wasn't worth the wait. And like, I'm eager for more. I just hope that season 3 is tighter than this one was, because if I had to sum up my issues with season 2 in one sentence, is that it's not very tight, and it feels like it's bouncing around a little too much, and it's maybe
For
stretched.
8 episodes, it definitely should. That's one of the
Yeah,
advantages of doing streaming services, or doing a streaming show, and giving it a concise number of episodes is that you have no filler and the story is tight.
yeah, and like, it's not that there's filler here necessarily, but it feels like we had to. It's filler in the sense that we, again, like with the Deep and A Train, we just didn't have a lot of meaty material to give some of the cast members. So they're either off screen for a long time, or we sort of have them doing stuff that takes up screen time but isn't all that interesting or all that well executed. And that's not a lot of the season, but it's enough to be noticeable. And I just hope that season 3 sort of ameliorates that.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Jason Ackles at all?
Oh, yeah.
Jensen Ackles?
Yeah, and you just sent me before we started the announcement and the discussion of him being Soldier Boy. And yeah, I don't like follow him, but I've seen him and like heard enough about him and stuff to know that he's like a well-respected actor, and it's interesting to see him show up, and I'm looking forward to his role.
Yeah, and I am going to go through Supernatural for two reasons. Because he, of course, is the lead of that show and is going to be starring in season 3 of The Boys. Mainly because Eric Kripke, is the showrunner for that show. And I know the show has a pretty rabid fan base, so I'm gonna see if I like it.
Hmm. So
But
yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to our talk about the boys. And much like the show itself, after episode 6, we forgot to talk about Cindy. But that'll be
I
fun.
cannot believe we didn't mention her at all.
I'm not surprised. I'm honestly not surprised that it slipped our minds, because she makes an impression in episode 6 and then leaves and then is never brought up again.
Oh yeah, that's true. I will say, uh, the red herring. Like, I don't even know if she was intentionally made to be a red herring, because I saw some people saying, "Oh, she's clearly the one blowing up heads," and I'm like, guys, she was locked up when Susan's head exploded.
Yeah, and like, what would her motivation be?
Yeah, why would she be helping Vought? Um, but yeah, um, that was also a really fun episode, and oh my god, this isn't the first show I've even seen do this, but using a penis as part of a fight scene, and like that thing was nuts. But like, I've seen that before. They did it in Ash versus Evil Dead, that show. Ash is fighting a dead possessed body, and pretty much that exact same thing happens.
Mm,
But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed our discussion of the show. Let us know your thoughts, all that good stuff.
yeah. Thanks for listening.